You will not believe what happens to the girl at the end. Make sure to like and subscribe so we can continue writing stories like this one. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below.
In the dusty lands of West Texas, where the sun beat down like a blacksmith's hammer, lived a cattle baron named Jedediah Stone. Jedediah wasn't just rich, he was wealthy beyond most folks' wildest dreams. He owned thousands of acres, sprawling herds of longhorn cattle, and a mansion that could swallow a small town whole. But Jedediah had a problem. He loved his money more than anything else in the world. Some folks said Jedediah squeezed every penny until the buffalo cried. He'd argue over the price of a cup of coffee, and he certainly wasn't known for his generosity. His workers were paid the bare minimum, and charity was a word that seemed to be missing from his vocabulary. To Jedediah, every dollar saved was a dollar earned, and every dollar given away was a dollar wasted. He believed in hard work and pulling oneself up by one's bootstraps, conveniently forgetting that he'd inherited most of his wealth. Jedediah's ranch, known as Stone Creek Ranch, was his pride and joy. He spent countless hours overseeing his cattle, ensuring they were the finest in the region. He entered them in competitions, winning prize after prize. His cattle were more than just livestock, they were investments, symbols of his success, and, in his mind, extensions of himself. He bragged about them constantly, telling anyone who would listen about their superior breeding and exceptional value. He treated his prize bulls better than most people treated their families, making sure they had the best food, the cleanest water, and even shade during the hottest parts of the day. He truly believed his cattle were the key to his continued wealth and power. The local townspeople often whispered about his stinginess and wondered what it would take for Jedediah to open his heart and his wallet, even just a little. Across the dusty plains, a few miles from Stone Creek Ranch, lived Dr. Eli Johnson. He wasn't a wealthy man, not by a long shot. His house was small, his clothes were simple, and his horse was old and a bit swaybacked. But what Dr. Eli lacked in material possessions, he more than made up for in kindness and skill. He was known throughout the county as a healer, a man who dedicated his life to easing the suffering of others. Dr. Eli had a gentle touch and a warm smile that could put even the most frightened child at ease. He'd listen patiently to his patients, taking the time to understand their ailments and offering comfort and reassurance. He never turned anyone away regardless of their ability to pay. Whether they were wealthy ranchers or struggling farmers, Dr. Eli treated them all with the same level of care and respect. His medical bag was always packed, and he was always ready to answer a call for help, no matter the time of day or night. He traveled miles on horseback, through scorching heat and freezing cold, to reach those in need. He knew the human body like the back of his hand, and he possessed a deep understanding of herbs and remedies. Some folks even whispered that he had a touch of magic about him, a gift for healing that went beyond mere medical knowledge. Unlike Jedediah Stone, Dr. Eli believed that wealth was meant to be shared. He often volunteered his services at the local church and donated what little money he had to those less fortunate than himself. He saw the good in everyone and always tried to lend a helping hand. He was a pillar of the community, a beacon of hope in a sometimes harsh and unforgiving land. While Jedediah hoarded his riches, Dr. Eli freely gave of his time, his skills, and his compassion. The contrast between the two men couldn't have been starker, and the townsfolk often wondered what would happen when their paths inevitably crossed. The inevitable happened. A frantic messenger from Stone Creek Ranch arrived at Dr. Eli's doorstep one sweltering afternoon. It was Jedediah Stone's wife, Martha, who was in desperate need. Their youngest child, little Thomas, had fallen gravely ill. He was burning with fever, his breathing was shallow, and he wouldn't eat or drink anything. Martha, a kind and gentle woman trapped in a loveless marriage, pleaded with Dr. Eli to come at once. Dr. Eli, without hesitation, gathered his medical bag and prepared to leave. But before he could mount his horse, Jedediah Stone himself emerged from the shadows, his face etched with worry but his eyes still glinting with suspicion. He gruffly explained the situation, then, in a move that shocked even Dr. Eli, he declared, "Doctor, I appreciate you coming, but I'm a businessman. I can't be throwing away money on lost causes. If you think the boy has no chance, then I'm not paying you a dime." Dr. Eli was taken aback. He'd never encountered such blatant disregard for a child's life. He looked from Jedediah's hard face to Martha's tear-filled eyes and then back to the anxious messenger. He knew little Thomas needed help immediately. He took a deep breath, trying to control his rising anger. "Mr. Stone," he said calmly, "a child's life is worth more than all the money in the world. I can't promise anything, but I will do everything in my power to help your son." Jedediah remained unmoved. "That's all well and good, doctor, but I need a guarantee. No cure, no pay. That's my final offer." He crossed his arms, his stance daring Dr. Eli to refuse. The messenger shifted nervously, and Martha let out a quiet sob. The air crackled with tension. Dr. Eli knew he had a difficult decision to make, one that would test his principles and his commitment to his oath. The health and well-being of a young boy hung in the balance. Dr. Eli looked at Martha, her eyes pleading with him to help her son. He knew he couldn't turn his back on a child in need, no matter how unreasonable the father was being. He straightened his shoulders and looked Jedediah directly in the eye. "Mr. Stone," he said firmly, "I didn't become a doctor for the money. I became a doctor to help people. I will treat your son to the best of my ability, and I will not accept any payment if you are not satisfied with the outcome." Jedediah raised an eyebrow, surprised by Dr. Eli's unwavering resolve. He hadn't expected the doctor to agree to his terms, but he wasn't about to back down now. "Very well, doctor," he said with a smirk. "But don't come crying to me if you fail. A deal's a deal." Dr. Eli ignored Jedediah's taunt and turned his attention to Martha. "Take me to your son," he said gently. Martha, relieved and grateful, led him into the grand mansion, a stark contrast to Dr. Eli's humble home. They climbed the sweeping staircase to a lavishly decorated nursery. Little Thomas lay in a large crib, his face flushed with fever, his small body trembling. Dr. Eli immediately set to work, examining the boy with practiced hands. He listened to his breathing, checked his pulse, and asked Martha questions about his symptoms. He quickly diagnosed a severe case of pneumonia. He knew he had to act fast. He unpacked his medical bag and began preparing a poultice to help ease Thomas's breathing. He also mixed a fever-reducing potion from his collection of herbs. He worked tirelessly throughout the night, tending to the sick child, while Martha stayed by his side, offering assistance and words of encouragement. Jedediah, however, remained distant, watching from the doorway with a skeptical gaze, still unconvinced that Dr. Eli could save his son. The fate of little Thomas hung precariously in the balance, resting on the skill and dedication of the kind-hearted doctor. As the first rays of dawn peeked through the nursery window, Dr. Eli finally allowed himself a moment of rest. He'd been up all night, constantly monitoring Thomas's condition, administering medicine, and soothing the boy's fevered brow. Slowly but surely, Thomas's condition began to improve. His breathing became easier, his fever subsided, and he even managed to sip a little broth. Martha, exhausted but overjoyed, watched with tears in her eyes as her son began to recover. She thanked Dr. Eli profusely, her voice choked with emotion. "You saved his life, doctor," she whispered. "I don't know how to ever repay you." Dr. Eli smiled wearily. "Just seeing him get better is payment enough, Mrs. Stone," he replied. He knew that Thomas wasn't completely out of the woods yet, but he was confident that the worst was over. He instructed Martha on how to continue Thomas's care and promised to return the following day to check on his progress. Jedediah, however, remained aloof. He acknowledged Dr. Eli's efforts with a curt nod, but offered no words of gratitude. He still seemed more concerned about the potential cost than the well-being of his son. Dr. Eli, used to Jedediah's cold demeanor, simply packed his bag and prepared to leave. As he walked out of the mansion, he couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. He had done his duty, and he had saved a child's life, regardless of the circumstances. He mounted his old horse and rode off into the rising sun, leaving Stone Creek Ranch behind. He knew that word of his selfless act would soon spread throughout the community, further solidifying his reputation as a compassionate and dedicated healer. He also knew that Jedediah Stone's reputation would likely suffer as a result of his miserly behavior. The contrast between the two men was now even more pronounced, and the townsfolk would undoubtedly take notice. News travels fast in small towns, especially when it involves a wealthy cattle baron and a selfless doctor. It wasn't long before the story of Jedediah Stone's stinginess and Dr. Eli's compassion spread like wildfire throughout the county. The messenger who had fetched Dr. Eli couldn't help but share the tale with everyone he met. Martha, too, confided in a few close friends, her voice filled with gratitude for the doctor and dismay at her husband's behavior. The townsfolk were outraged by Jedediah's actions. They couldn't believe that he would put money above the life of his own child. They shook their heads in disgust and muttered about his lack of morals. The story became a common topic of conversation at the local saloon, the general store, and even at Sunday church services. People couldn't stop talking about it. Dr. Eli, on the other hand, was hailed as a hero. His selfless act was praised far and wide. People spoke of his kindness, his dedication, and his unwavering commitment to helping others. They admired him for standing up to Jedediah Stone and for putting the needs of a child before his own financial gain. His reputation soared, and more people sought his medical advice. The story even reached the ears of a traveling newspaper reporter who saw it as a perfect example of the contrast between wealth and compassion in the Wild West. He wrote a lengthy article about the incident, highlighting Jedediah's greed and Dr. Eli's generosity. The article was published in newspapers across the state, further amplifying the story and solidifying the reputations of both men. Jedediah Stone became known as the Miser Baron, while Dr. Eli Johnson became known as the Angel of the Plains. The stage was set for a reckoning, a moment when the consequences of their actions would come to bear. The town held its breath, waiting to see what fate had in store for the cattle baron and the compassionate doctor. Just when Jedediah Stone thought things couldn't get any worse, disaster struck. A mysterious disease began to sweep through his prized cattle herd. At first, it was just a few animals showing signs of illness, listlessness, loss of appetite, and a strange, hacking cough. But within days, the disease spread like wildfire, infecting dozens, then hundreds of cattle. Jedediah watched in horror as his precious animals, the symbols of his wealth and success, began to weaken and die. He tried everything he could think of to stop the spread of the disease. He quarantined the sick animals, consulted with every veterinarian he could find, and even resorted to old wives' tales and folk remedies. But nothing seemed to work. The disease continued its relentless march, decimating his herd. Panic set in. Jedediah's financial empire was built on his cattle. If the disease wiped out his entire herd, he would be ruined. He paced back and forth, wringing his hands, his face etched with worry. He couldn't sleep, he couldn't eat, and he couldn't think of anything else but the impending doom of his ranch. The other ranchers in the area, while sympathetic to Jedediah's plight, couldn't help but feel a sense of schadenfreude. They remembered his stinginess, his arrogance, and his lack of compassion. They whispered that this was karma, a just punishment for his selfish ways. Some even suggested that the disease was a divine retribution for his treatment of Dr. Eli and his refusal to help those in need. Jedediah, however, didn't care about karma or divine retribution. He only cared about saving his cattle and his fortune. He knew he had to do something drastic, something that he would have never considered before. He had to swallow his pride and seek help from the one man he had wronged, Dr. Eli Johnson. Desperation had finally forced the Miser Baron to confront his own failings. The question was, would Dr. Eli be willing to help him after the way he had been treated? With his ranch on the brink of collapse, Jedediah Stone made the long, humiliating ride to Dr. Eli's humble home. He arrived late in the afternoon, the setting sun casting long shadows across the dusty landscape. He dismounted his horse, his face grim, and approached the door, his hand trembling slightly as he knocked. Dr. Eli answered the door, his expression calm and composed. He showed no surprise at seeing Jedediah, as if he had been expecting him all along. "Mr. Stone," he said simply, "what can I do for you?" Jedediah, humbled and desperate, swallowed his pride and poured out his story. He told Dr. Eli about the disease that was ravaging his cattle herd, the financial ruin that loomed, and the desperate measures he had already taken. He confessed that he had been wrong to treat Dr. Eli the way he had, and he begged for his help. "Doctor," he pleaded, "I know I don't deserve it, but I'm desperate. My entire livelihood is at stake. I'll pay you anything, name your price. I'll give you half my fortune if you can save my cattle." He pulled out a large pouch filled with gold coins and held it out to Dr. Eli, his hand shaking. "Please, doctor, I'm begging you. Save my herd." The Miser Baron was finally brought to his knees, his wealth rendered meaningless in the face of impending disaster. The roles had reversed, and the man who had once looked down on Dr. Eli now groveled at his feet, his fate entirely in the doctor's hands. The air was thick with unspoken words, with the weight of past wrongs and the glimmer of a possible redemption. Would Dr. Eli accept Jedediah's offer, or would he turn his back on the man who had once turned his back on a sick child? The answer would determine not only the fate of Stone Creek Ranch but also the future of the community that had watched this drama unfold. Dr. Eli listened patiently to Jedediah's desperate plea, his gaze steady and unwavering. He saw the genuine remorse in the Baron's eyes, the understanding that his actions had consequences. He also saw the suffering of the animals and the potential for widespread economic hardship if the disease wasn't stopped. After a long moment of silence, Dr. Eli spoke, his voice calm and measured. "Mr. Stone," he said, "I will help you. I can't stand by and watch your cattle suffer, and I know that many families in this county depend on your ranch for their livelihood. Relief washed over Jedediah's face, but it was quickly replaced by confusion when Dr. Eli continued. However, the doctor said, holding up his hand, I won't accept your money. I didn't help your son for the promise of riches, and I won't help your cattle for the same reason. Jedediah was stunned. But doctor, he stammered, I don't understand. I'm offering you half my fortune. Why would you refuse? Dr. Eli smiled gently. Mr. Stone, I've learned that true wealth isn't measured in gold or land. It's measured in the good you do for others, in the lives you touch, and in the legacy you leave behind. I have enough to live comfortably, and I don't need your money. He paused, then continued, his voice filled with purpose. But there is something you can do to repay me, something that will benefit the entire community. He looked Jedediah directly in the eye, waiting for his response. The stage was set for Dr. Eli to propose his alternative to payment, a request that would not only heal Jedediah's cattle but also potentially heal his soul. Dr. Eli leaned forward, his eyes filled with a quiet intensity. Mr. Stone, he said, I know you're a wealthy man, but there are many people in this region who aren't so fortunate. They struggle to afford even the most basic medical care. I've always dreamed of opening a free clinic, a place where anyone, regardless of their income, can receive the treatment they need. He paused, letting his words sink in. So here's my proposition, he continued. I will dedicate my time and skills to curing your cattle, to stopping this disease from spreading and saving your livelihood. But in return, I don't want your money. Instead, I want you to fund the construction and operation of a free clinic for the poor in this region. You have the resources, Mr. Stone, to make a real difference in the lives of countless people. Jedediah stared at Dr. Eli, his mind reeling. He had expected the doctor to demand an exorbitant sum of money, perhaps even half his fortune, as he had offered. But he never imagined that Dr. Eli would ask for something so selfless. He had always viewed charity as a weakness, a waste of money. But now, faced with the prospect of losing everything, he was being asked to embrace the very thing he had always scorned. He thought of the families who struggled to make ends meet, the children who went without proper medical care, the elderly who suffered in silence. He thought of his own son, Thomas, and how grateful he was that Dr. Eli had saved his life. He began to see things in a new light, to understand that true wealth wasn't just about accumulating riches, but about using those riches to help others. The decision before him was a difficult one, but he knew deep down that it was the right thing to do. The fate of his cattle, his community, and perhaps even his own soul hung in the balance. Jedediah hesitated, his mind warring between his ingrained stinginess and the desperate need to save his livelihood. The thought of parting with so much money that could be used to expand his ranch or buy even more prized cattle, gnawed at him. But he knew he had no other choice. He had exhausted all other options, and Dr. Eli was his last hope. He took a deep breath and looked Dr. Eli in the eye. All right, doctor, he said, his voice heavy with reluctance. I agree. I'll fund your free clinic. Build it, staff it, whatever it takes. Just save my cattle. A faint smile touched Dr. Eli's lips. I'm glad to hear it, Mr. Stone, he said. I promise you, you won't regret this decision. Not just because it will save your herd, but because it will change your life. With the agreement in place, Dr. Eli wasted no time. He immediately set to work gathering his supplies and preparing to travel to Stone Creek Ranch. He knew that time was of the essence and that every day that passed meant more cattle lost to the disease. He packed his medical bag with potent herbs, powerful remedies, and a wealth of knowledge that he had accumulated over years of practice. Jedediah, still somewhat dazed by his own decision, watched as Dr. Eli prepared to leave. He couldn't shake the feeling that he had just made a deal with the devil, that he had traded his soul for the salvation of his cattle. But as he looked into Dr. Eli's kind and compassionate eyes, he began to wonder if perhaps he had made a deal with an angel instead. He knew that the coming days would be a test not only of Dr. Eli's medical skills but also of his own willingness to embrace a new way of life. The fate of Stone Creek Ranch and the soul of Jedediah Stone now rested on the shoulders of the Angel of the Plains. Dr. Eli arrived at Stone Creek Ranch and immediately assessed the situation. The sight that greeted him was grim, hundreds of cattle lying sick and weak, their eyes dull, their bodies emaciated. The air was thick with the stench of disease and death. He knew he had a monumental task ahead of him, but he was determined to succeed. He worked tirelessly, day and night, treating the sick animals, isolating the infected ones, and implementing strict hygiene protocols to prevent the disease from spreading further. He mixed potent herbal remedies, administered vaccines, and provided supportive care to the weakened cattle. He taught Jedediah's ranch hands how to properly care for the sick animals and how to prevent the spread of the disease. Jedediah, to his credit, threw himself into the effort, working alongside Dr. Eli and his ranch hands. He helped administer medicine, clean the infected areas, and provide food and water to the weakened cattle. He even learned to recognize the early signs of the disease, allowing him to isolate the sick animals more quickly. He began to see his cattle not just as investments, but as living creatures that deserved his care and compassion. Slowly but surely, Dr. Eli's efforts began to pay off. The disease started to abate and the sick cattle began to recover. The death rate slowed and new cases became less frequent. Within weeks, the outbreak was contained and the herd began to heal. Jedediah Stone's cattle had been saved and he was spared from financial ruin. He looked at Dr. Eli with a newfound respect and gratitude, finally understanding the true value of the man he had once scorned. The Angel of the Plains had not only saved his cattle but had also opened his eyes to a new way of seeing the world. The transformation of Jedediah Stone was just beginning. True to his word, Jedediah Stone funded the construction of the free clinic. He hired the best builders, purchased the finest medical equipment, and recruited a team of dedicated doctors and nurses. The clinic, named the Angel of the Plains Clinic in honor of Dr. Eli, opened its doors to the community, providing much-needed healthcare to those who couldn't afford it. Dr. Eli, of course, became the clinic's chief physician, dedicating his life to serving the poor and the sick. He treated patients with the same care and compassion he had always shown, and the clinic quickly became a beacon of hope for the entire region. Jedediah Stone, meanwhile, underwent a profound transformation. He became a regular visitor to the clinic, volunteering his time and resources to help those in need. He learned the names of the patients, listened to their stories, and offered them words of encouragement. He even started donating a portion of his profits to the clinic, ensuring that it would continue to serve the community for years to come. He realized that true wealth wasn't about accumulating riches, but about using those riches to make a difference in the world. He learned the importance of generosity, compassion, and helping others. He finally understood the lesson that Dr. Eli had tried to teach him all along. The miser baron was no more. In his place stood a man who was respected and admired by the entire community, a man who had finally discovered the true meaning of wealth and happiness. And as he looked at the smiling faces of the patients at the Angel of the Plains Clinic, he knew that he had finally found his redemption. The tale of Jedediah Stone and Dr. Eli Johnson became a legend in West Texas, a reminder that even the most hardened hearts can be softened by compassion, and that even the wealthiest individuals can find true fulfillment in helping those less fortunate than themselves. The end.